Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar. It's about time to get started now. It's gone a couple of minutes past the time that we're going to start. My name is Mike Langton. I'm one of the senior application engineers at Guideline Geo, and it's my job today to go through this webinar with you. Alongside me, I have a colleague, Jana Gustafsson. Just say hello, Jana, if you like.
Hello, and welcome.
Jana's going to just be my assistant for the session, just to monitor the questions. If you take a look down that side of the screen, there's a chat box there. That's the best avenue for you to actually ask any questions. Please do so at any point throughout the session. If it's a quick answer, Jana will do that. I'm going to concentrate on the presentation. Jana will monitor that, and like I say, if there's any quick questions, Jana can deal with those. If there's anything that takes a little bit longer, then we'll leave that towards the end. We'll have a question and answer session towards the end, so feel free. You can actually put your question, mark it as private if you wish, if you don't want your name to be transmitted around the world. We will just answer that without mentioning your name if that is the case. And the other thing as well, just above my head somewhere, possibly over that side, and there's a reconnect button. If I stop talking, I never stop talking, by the way. If I do stop talking or the presentation freezes, then the best thing to do is just hit that button and that should reconnect you rather than going back out and back in again. And that's probably a quicker way of connecting on that one. So I will start the presentation and just share my screen with you. Just bear with me a second. Here we go. Okay, so officially, welcome to this Object Mapper webinar. It is going to be based a little bit around the software that the Object Mapper is, Object Mapper 2018, but it's not just about the actual software itself. Object Mapper is a project-based system for data collection, etc. If you have got any questions after the session, after we're finished, if you think of anything, there's my contact details, mike.langton at Guideline Geo. I'll pop that up right at the end as well, just in case you haven't got that. There's also, you can make any inquiries via our website as well as an inquiry form there for you to fill in if you need to do that also. But we welcome any comments, any feedback, and any questions at any point. We're here to help you. Both Jana and I are here to answer and assist all our customers, clients, and potential users for the equipment. So please feel free at any point to drop us a line. We're more than welcome, and we do look forward to getting questions, etc. So the MALÅ Object Mapper. What is it? Well, like I said, the key feature here, or the key thing, is the actual software itself. It's the Object Mapper 2018 version. That's the latest. The idea behind it is a 2D software package. It's not three-dimensional, but the idea behind it is to make quick and easy data collection and data processing, particularly. It's quite a simplified system. It's quite a simplified software. There may be some limitations over what some other more complex software is out there. There may be some features that you may want in there, but we've kept it simple. We're keeping it with the same ethos as the actual GPRs themselves: easy to use, easy to operate, etc. So quick and easy data processing, really quick, and I'll give you a quick demonstration a little bit later. There's an easy to use filter options in there. It's relatively straightforward, and there's the quick insertion of markers. And what we're going to do there, we're going to process the data, we're going to interpret the data, then insert the markers into the data set, and that's then going to be exported to DXF, or a couple of the options as well in there for you to use in GIS or AutoCAD or something similar. It also has background maps. If you've applied a GPS to your data collection, well, when you're collecting the data, there is the internal GPS on many of our antennas. What I would say is, generally speaking, those are low grade resolution. Those are there just to to put some coordinates into the data set itself. I wouldn't use that if I was going to map out particular utilities. It's not accurate enough. You need to go to something like an RTK based GPS. So an external GPS, you're going to connect to the GPR, and that will give us a high accuracy GPS where that is possible. But when you do use a GPS, like I said, there's background maps on the software, which is a nice feature. And again, you'll see that a little bit later. And very much with this in mind, the typical application areas are really predominantly utilities. I have used it in some other application areas, but particularly where we're looking for objects, linear features, and that type of thing, that's where it's really going to win, and it's really effective, etc. So that's what the software looks like. Like I said, we're going to give you a quick demonstration later. We've got the background maps there on the left-hand side. You can see the profile lines that I've collected on here, and also a number of profiles on the right-hand side. We can change the number of profiles on the right-hand side. You can increase or decrease that depending on what you're wanting to do. Like I said, I'm going to give you a quick run through of that a little bit later. So you'll see all the features and functions on there. So just taking a step back slightly from the software and actually looking at the project itself, the Object Mapper project. So we need to look at what that is and how we do things. And this is one of the slight stumbling blocks around operating the system is sometimes don't quite understand or grasp the idea of how we're collecting the data. So I'm going to run through that with you a little bit. So a little bit of a training course, to be honest, just to start off with. But the Object Mapper, it's a way of collecting GPR, like I said, predominantly utility survey data and the actual computer software itself. You'll notice for those of you who are or have used the MALÅ products, the MALÅ GPRs, you'll find when you fire up the GPR, there's this option, the Object Mapper project option. Typically, you may go in and do the 2D project, 2D lines, and collect and view data in that option. But I'm looking at the Object Mapper project option here, and if you go into that option, another screen will pop up, this one, and this is where we can actually create a new project. And I'm going to hit that button there. Another screen will pop up at that point, and this is where we need to decide what we're going to do. And there's two options when we're collecting the data. The Object Mapper project is all about collecting the data and positioning that actual data and giving it some coordinates. So then once we process that data, we can line up all the data sets, all the profiles, and interpret them. So you've got two options. We have a GPS option. So if I've connected an external GPS, I would switch this to on. And when that happens, all these coordinates down here will disappear. These coordinates are here at this point for the baseline. And this is where we're going to put each profile, its positional information, its direction, etc., how far along the baseline we are when we're collecting the data. So we need to give the baseline some coordinates. I'm going to explain that in a second to you. Like I say, if you switch the GPS on, those will disappear. So you've got an option of baseline or GPS. You can, if you wish, if you're using something like a total station, you can still create a baseline. And when you're collecting all your topographical information from around the site, like your curb lines and other features, maybe other utilities you've located with some other techniques, you can pick up the baseline stop and start point on that. And then when we export out later, we can overlay our baseline onto that actual line that you've collected from the site. So there is ways of working it with something like a total station. You just got to think about that and how you do that, but that is possible. Once we've inserted the start and the stop of the baseline itself, then we can start the project. And when we start the project, another window pops up, and this is where we can start the profile. You can actually use the measuring wheel at this point if you wish to actually mark out your points that where you're going to collect the data, the lines along the baseline. And you can also stop the project at that point. But once we've collected all the data, then you must stop the project to close a project down and save it in effect. Okay. So if we have a look at a typical site here, a roadway, we're gonna mark out two baselines. Now, when we're creating the project, one baseline per project. You can't create multiple baselines within one project. So here on this site, I'm going to create two baselines, and that would be two separate projects. Now, what we can do later in the software is we can add these projects together, and you can add multiple projects, as many as you want, into that one. So just keep adding on your baselines if needed. So I'm going to create a baseline along the street. I would refer to this as my Y baseline, because my coordinate system is going to be quite simple. The bottom corner here will be my 0, 0, and this is my X axis, sorry, my Y axis, sorry, along the street here. And this baseline is going to be used for collecting the data profiles running across the street. We're going to create a second baseline. This is what I would refer to as my X baseline. And that's where we're going to collect the data up and down the street, looking for the utilities crossing the street. So we mark out the baseline intervals. Those set intervals are dependent on the area, depends on your project or your project specification. That could be a meter, it could be 10 meters, whatever your specification is for your project. Don't forget, we need to mark the X baseline as well. But the idea is we're going to start with the radar, move it across the street, come to the baseline. We will pause for a second with the radar. We enter the information into the GPR of the position along the baseline and which direction we're moving in. And then we would create a baseline crossing into the data set itself. And then we continue to move across in that direction. And we'll continue up the street along the baseline progressively as we go. And then once we've created that one, then we move to the X baseline, and we can move down and again pause on the baseline, enter the information, and then continue collecting the data. Like so. So just to get your head around how we do that exactly, well, I'm going to create a simple baseline at this point. And I'm going to put some marks across that baseline. And just for example, I've just got a 24 meter line length baseline on this point. We've got the GPR in the bottom left-hand corner. And what you can do with the system here, you can actually start the GPR on the baseline if you wish. You can cross the baseline like we're going to do now, or you can end on the baseline. But every profile, generally speaking, has to either start on the baseline, end on the baseline, or cross the baseline at some point. So your profile lengths can be different lengths if needed along the baseline, but you've got to stop, start, or cross the baseline at some point to give that information. So we're going to move the GPR. So we start the profile, we move to the baseline once we've started, and at that point then we pause. And in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, there is the BL crossing button. That is the baseline crossing button. So you enter that, and another screen will pop up at that point. And here it's going to ask you where you are and in reference to which direction you're moving as well to the baseline start point. So the distance at this point, because I'm on the 0, is going to be 0, obviously. The angle from the profile direction to the baseline start, here's the key thing. The angle has to point towards the start of the baseline. So imagine I'm just 1 millimeter to the right of that baseline start. That compass will need to point at 270. So it's pointing towards the beginning of that baseline. And once you've set those details into the options there, then we can create the crossing at that point. It will then go back to the standard 2D screen. You then continue your line of data collection until you get to the end, and then you can stop the profile at that point. We then move the radar over. We're going to do a zigzag fashion of data collection, and you can go in one direction if you wish, or more effectively in this case here, we're going to go 2 directions. So we're going to zigzag across the site. So we start the next profile. We then move, so we've moved over here 1 meter, just an example. We're going to move down to the baseline at that point, hit the baseline crossing button again. The screen pops up again. Now, you've got to think about this. The radar's facing the opposite direction. It's facing downwards. And the compass now needs to point to 90 degrees, like so. I've entered the 1 meter along the baseline at this point. And I've entered the obviously the direction pointing at 90 degrees because you're pointing towards the right. Create the crossing once again, and then you continue your data collection until you get to the end. and then you stop the profile. Move over again. Again, 1 meter. You can increase that if you want. You can, if you need to go to 2, 5, 10 meters, whatever. We're just going to input that data again when we come to the baseline crossing screen. But I'm keeping it continuous here. We move over, start the profile, move back down to the baseline. The window pops up again, and we now put the distance at 2 meters, and that's from the beginning of the baseline start point, the 0, 0. Angle will go back to 270, and we create the crossing once again. Now, once you've done 2 lines, the GPR will figure out what you're doing. And if you're keeping it consistent, if I've gone this 1 meter each time and I've zigzagged in both directions, the next time we do the baseline crossing, so again, moving over, moving down to the baseline, we're coming to this box here, it will automatically go to 3 meters and the compass will automatically point to the right for you. And all you're going to do then is just confirm it by hitting the baseline crossing. So we continue the project like so, moving backwards and forwards and creating the baseline every time you cross that baseline. And like I say, you can start on the baseline. If I did, then I would just purely just go straight to baseline crossing and put the information in. So just continue across your site. I'm keeping the angles exactly at right angle for the profile lines opposed to the line of the baseline at this point. We can do something a little bit later. I'll show you that a bit later. We can do it at different angles, etc. Okay, so once I've completed the data collection, I would stop the project and we can then upload that data onto a memory stick, onto the USB, by the USB port on the back of the GPR, and then we can transfer that to the PC. Just one thing to note on that one, when you go into the file options on the GPR to upload the data, the first screen that you'll go into when you ask it to go into the files, it'll go into the actual project, actually into the project folder itself, and you'll see all the lines, all the profile, the data lines, etc. You need to go up a folder or up a level, up the directory, because what we want to do when we transferring that data, we want to take the whole project and in the folder itself. So you'll see all the data. You need to go up a level into the directory, and you'll see then the project that you give it the name, whatever the name was that you gave it at the beginning of the Object Mapper project when we were collecting the data. And then you take all that data with you, and it will transfer everything across seamlessly for you in that case. So once we've transferred the data, you can then open up the project itself, and I'll show you that a little bit later when I go live on a quick demonstration. But it's just simple. Just go File, Open, go find your data, and then you hit the project name, and it'll be a file. The project will be a .obm file with all the information in there. So here I've got I've used GPS on this instance here, and you can see the background maps and the profile lines, and you can see a number of profiles down the right-hand side. You can increase or decrease the amount of profiles that you wish to see at one time. You'll notice on the map there is a line, the profile line, which is in green in color, and then there's 2 blues. The green is the top one, the top profile, and the 2 blues are the ones underneath sequentially. And what I can do at that point, and if I wish, I can just click in any of these lines, any of the profile lines in the sitemap, and you'll see the 3 lines will appear on the right-hand side, the one that you selected and the 2 after it. Like I say, you can increase or decrease those numbers if you wish. I tend to have 3, maybe 4. I just like to see a few of the profiles at the same time. So that's just running through the software very quickly. Like I said, I'll give you a quick demonstration later. If we've used the baseline option, the data collection, then the sitemap will be like this. There'll be no background map at that point because it's just a local coordinate. And we might have used, for instance, like here, we've used 0, 0 as the start point for the coordinate of the baseline, and the end of the baseline is something like 24.5 meters long for the end of the baseline, the stop point. And you can see the profiles all lined up in there. The little dot at the beginning of the profile down that section there, if you can see that, is telling me which direction, where I started the profile in effect. The baseline will show up on the actual profile data view on the right-hand side. You see that there's a red line as well. So when we come to look at the data, and once we've done the interpretation and we've inserted the markers, you can see the markers that have been inserted across the site map. And again, I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. We can then go to the export options once the project's finished. And we've got a few different options here. We can export to DXF. We can export to an ASCII, tabulated ASCII file, and that will just have all the coordinates of each of the markers, including the Z or the Z value, the depth value as well, and the coordinates. If you've used the coordinates from the GPS, then that will be in there as well in UTM. There's also an option there for the GPS mapper. The GPS mapper is an additional software, and this is where we can export the markers. We can convert them to KMLs, and we can open that up in Google Earth, Google Maps, the markers themselves, if you need to do that. So once we export it, then the markers will be taken out. We will have two sets of markers taken. So if I just placed one marker into that data set, when I open that up in the software, there will actually be two markers. One of the markers will have a 0Z value, i.e. on the surface, and then the second marker will have the Z value of what I picked at that marker in the data set itself. So there's two sets of data markers there. But you can see there's a whole series of markers, and you can see one above the other on that one. But that then can be opened up, like say in AutoCAD or something similar, or GIS, etc. Filtering is really quick. You'll find, and again, show you a little bit later, but all I'm going to do is right-click in the data, go to the file option, filter option, and we have the filter selections on the left-hand side. You highlight the one that you want. You click add, and that filter will be applied to the data set, and you'll instantly see that. And when you apply a filter, it's not just applied to one profile, it's applied to all of them. And the other thing is, well, if you've got a number of projects across a site, if you leave the Object Mapper program open and you just open up a new project, the filters that you've already selected will be applied to that new data set. So you don't have to keep repeating this. And then another option that you can do here is you can actually save and load lists. So if you've got some preferred options when it comes to the filters, you can actually save your favorites in effect. So a few different options there. Another nice feature within the software itself, as well as the hyperbola fitting option, hyperbola matching tool. You hit the icon there and the circle at the top. It will insert the false hyperbola into data. Here it's marked as a yellow false hyperbola. Place that over the top of a true hyperbola, and then we can increase or decrease the size of that hyperbola. As long as you've got the wheel calibration correct, this can give you a relatively reliable velocity measurement. There's a few things we need to double check when we're doing this, but it's a good way of checking the velocity, and then that will then do the conversion to the depth for us automatically in there. So hyperbola fitting is probably my most used option when it comes to checking for the velocity and checking for the depth calculation. It's always good to have some other reference as well, if possible, from your site. If you know that a depth of a particular utility that you can see in the data set, we can insert that information in, and that's a double check in effect. So some other ways of measurement then, you can actually, like I said earlier, we can do some different angles. You don't have to go at right angles along the baseline. And what I tend to do there is if I come across at a slight angle, I will actually drop the monitor on the GPR down flat, and I'll move the compass around. You'll see it on the top until it points back to the beginning of the baseline. So you can actually put different angles in there. You just need to know the distance along the baseline that you've done. Sometimes some people like to do some 45-degree lines across the baseline, and you can do that. So you can just enter that just at any point throughout the data collection, just pop that information in. So you don't have to go exactly at right angles. And like I said, this is a GPS option, and just switch that to the on position, and that will start to record the GPS that's coming in from either internal or external. But like I said, the external will give you a more accurate, much more accurate measurement. And that's what we would recommend for sure. So I'm just going to switch now. I'm just going to go over to the demo. I've gone through that pretty quickly. But let me just go over to a project for you. Hopefully you can see that okay on the screen. Now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go into the filter options. I've got some filters already selected here. Let me just go ahead and remove those. And you'll see when I click OK, that's the raw data that you can see on the right-hand side. I've got five lines, profile lines actually selected. If I just go into the tools and go to the options, if you can see that, and there's a tab on here called GPR profiles. There's a few values you can see, and it might be difficult for you to see there if it's a little bit too small, but I can increase and decrease the number of profiles on here. So that's the visible profiles on the right-hand side of the screen. I can set the first arrival. If I need to adjust the first arrival, the time 0, I can do that manually at this point. I can manually change the ground velocity in here, and I can also put the GPS antenna height in at this point here as well, and a few different options in here as well to have a look at. But take a look at that yourself later if you like. You can download a trial version of this software or from our website. It will give you a 2-week trial period. You'll be able to download some demo data along with the actual software as well, so you can have a play about that if you wish to do that. If you do, if you just go to the help button and go to the option down here, the user manual, towards the end of the user manual, there is a nice section at the back. It's a beginner's guide to post-processing in the Object Mapper 2018, and that'll just point you through a few things that you need to go through, parameters, settings, etc. So that's quite useful. So if you do download the program there, you can just pop into there and have a quick look through there if you wish. Okay. So we need to process the data. It's raw data. It's imported raw on the right-hand side here. So what I'm going to do is I'll place my mouse pointer into the data. This is the quickest way of doing it. There's another option, go in Profiles, tab at the top. But I'm just going to right-click, go to the filters, and there's my list that pops up. And I'm going to just hit the first option, typically is the FIR. This is a bandpass filter. And I'm just going to click Add, and we can change the parameters. I'm just going to open up the top value just a little bit, 25, and click OK. I can, at that point, if I want to see what results that does to the data, I can click OK if I wish, and you'll see an instant change to the data. It's a subtle change then, but you can continue also, just keep applying your other filters. In this case, I'm going to apply an automatic gain control, an AGC. AGC can be good. It doesn't always make the data look the best. There's manual gain in there as well, but I'm just going to hit a couple of values in here. I'm going to apply a value of 480 in the bottom window. I just know this because I've used this data set quite a few times. I know what the values are best for this. But typically those values can change depending on your ground conditions. So have a play about with these values if you do. These won't be suitable for all data sets. You might have to increase the scale, decrease the window size, etc. It's a case of playing about with these values. But I guess 2 typical values in here could be 550 in these 2 windows respectively. And another nice filter that you may use is a delete mean trace, which is a background removal filter. I'm going to apply that as well. I'm just going to click OK to that. Just use the entire data set for this. Click OK, and you'll see that data change. I'm just going to apply just a little bit of contrast now. At the top, there is the contrast button, the slider bar, and I can increase. You can go way too high on this, but you can increase and decrease the contrast to whatever you feel is the best option. That's not too bad around there. Okay. So once you've processed it, you can see that's very quick to process the data. Sometimes you might have to apply a bit more gain. You might have to go into the manual gain just to apply some different values in there. But when you're happy with the data set, now it's maybe not the best looking data set with the automatic gain control, but at this point I can work with the data. If I was going to put this data into a report, then I might just apply some different filters to this to make it look a bit more pretty. But I've got the information I need at this point. And like I said, that was really quick and easy. You can then go ahead then and start inserting markers into the data set. We've got a series of markers across the top. There's a number of colors up here. If I just hover over the blue one, if I hit the blue button, I can then go ahead and put a marker, a blue marker, into the data set like so. And when I place that marker into the data on the left-hand side, the marker will be inserted into the sitemap. Again, I'm just having a little bit of difficulty seeing that, but you're going to progressively go through the data set. And if you know what the utility is itself, you can color code that, red electric, for instance, or blue for water. And you can actually give these markers a name in the options. If you go into the options tab, options, and then go into the marker options within the sub tab within the options there, you can actually give these a physical name, whatever you want to call the markers themselves. So you can progressively go through the data set, and like I say, you can just click anywhere in here and you can see the profiles changing. I'll just go and hit some of the vertical lines across here, and you can see the data changes as I go around selecting the different profile lines. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go to a different project where I've inserted all the markers. So I'm just going to go open. It's going to tell me that project's going to be closed. Do I want to save any changes? I'm going to say no to that. You can say yes, obviously. And just go find another data set. It's the same data set, just with markers. There's the Object Mapper project itself. All the data is within that. So we're just going to hit the .obm file there. And you'll see just in a second, all the markers are now being inserted into that data set. This is actually outside our office, our old office in Charleston, in South Carolina in the States. It's got some nice ground conditions. I have admittedly picked a nice data set here to show you. Your data won't always look as good as this, but this is a nice data set here. So you can see that I've inserted lots of markers into the data, different colors. Let's just go and take a look at a different profile here. And you can see down the right-hand side, the markers have been inserted, different colors, and they're all visible on the left-hand side. So once I'm happy that I've inserted all the markers, then we can export. Oh, before I do that, just let me just show you the hyperbola fitting. And the important thing is that you can actually do this hyperbola fitting at any point. So if you've forgotten to do it, just like I've done, if I insert the hyperbola now and change the velocity of the soil, all the markers that have already been placed into the data will be changed to the new value, to the new set. So I'm just going to hit the icon at the top for the insert hyperbola, and you might be able to just about see there that it's now inserted the yellow false hyperbola. I'm going to go right click and change velocity, and there will be a little slider bar that pops up, and I can increase and decrease the size of that false hyperbola until it matches the actual hyperbola itself. And again, you might be struggling to see this, but you can see at the bottom edge of the screen there, the velocity is now changed to 87 meters per microsecond. We can then just go back to the hyperbola there. I'm going to right click and set that current velocity, and that set that for the whole site. Now, occasionally, and it does actually happen on this data set here, you've got a section of the street with the asphalt, and then you've got this section of the street on the side area. It's just dirt, grass dirt section. The velocity is subtly different between the two. The best way of dealing with this, I would insert the markers that are running under the asphalt. I would change the velocity to set it correct, and I would export those markers out. I would then go on then to insert more markers into the rest of the area where the velocity is different, change the velocity and export those markers out. So you've got almost two DXFs, but the velocities will be different, and that's how we deal with different velocities across the same site. So I'm just going to deselect the hyperbola fitting tool on there. All right. So once you've gone through all of that, I'm going through this pretty quickly, but once you've gone through all of that, then you can just simply go File and Export, and you can export to, like I say, to DXF, ASCII file, or a GPS mapper. You can also, at that point under the File tab there, we can add a project. So if we've got the baseline projects, so I've opened up one baseline project, and let's say it's the X baseline. I want to add the Y baseline, a secondary project, second baseline. Then you can click the Add Project option. It will ask you if you want to continue. Yes, it's going to change the name, and you will then go and find your second baseline in a different folder, second project, and then you can click Go or OK to that, and then it will add the two baselines together. You end up with two baselines. I can take a quick look at that. I think I've got one. If I just open up another project, again, it's just going to ask me if I want to continue, and I think it's in this folder. It's called DNX1, so DN1X. And here I've created two baselines. There's one baseline that starts down at the bottom left-hand corner, runs across the bottom. And there's a second baseline that actually starts further along, and that would have a coordinate of X equals 15, Y equals 0 as a start point, and it runs right up towards the top. So you don't have to always have your baseline starting on 0, 0. You can add it at a different value. And like I say, if you've got a number of different baselines, as long as you know the coordinates, you can just add those in. So this is a baseline project. There is no background map now because we've got no coordinates because it's just a local grid. But you see there, it's just applied the same filters to it. Now I might want to go in and just change that to a completely different area for this data set. But you can see there, we've got some different sections, and we can look at the ones that are running vertically, and we can look at the ones that are running horizontally. So you can run around the site and insert the markers like so. So that's going through that really quickly. What else do we have? We got the option to go into the marker list. This is where we can just pop up all the markers in one go. I'll just pull that across for you. And what we can do here is you can see all the different markers. Each marker will have the different values, the X, Y, the trace number, etc. All the different information in there. And what we can do is we can either batch edit. So if you think, oh, I've selected the wrong color, you can change a number of these profiles if you want. You can select a number of them like so and change them, or delete them, get rid of them, etc. So there's a few different things on there. If I just go into the profile, just go back to the project manager for a second. Here I can remove profiles. If you've got one that's wrong, you can take that away if you want. You can add profiles if needed. We can change palettes if you wish. If you want the grayscales into color, we can do that under the profile options. We can go into the filter list. We can disable and enable filters, and we can also apply migration to the data set if you want to do that. Another way of actually checking velocity is migration. Sometimes I use that. Tools, we can actually convert the baseline to GPS. If you know the coordinates, the exact coordinates of the baseline start and the end point, we can convert that baseline into the real world coordinates in effect at that point. So if you do know that, and again, if you pick that the start and the stop of the baseline up with total station, you may have some coordinates in there. You can insert that in and it will convert it at that point. Or what sometimes I do, I export out the DXF and just rotate it over into place above the line that I've collected with the total station, and just fit the actual baseline into the right position, and then all the offsets for the markers will be there also. Okay. Like I say, finally, you've got the user manual option at the right hand end, and there's some good hints and tips in there as well. Okay, so that's going through it really quickly. I didn't want to spend too much time on that. It's just a bit of a demonstration to show you how quick and easy the software is itself. I've been using this for quite a while now. We've had a few different versions over the years, and when I'm doing the utilities, this is one I tend to fall back onto. We have different softwares for different applications, but this is one that's really lends itself to utilities. Typically in utilities, we're going to do most of the interpretation in 2D. You can start going to 3D in some different software packages, and we can provide that to you. But for a quick, efficient way of data collecting and data processing, a project itself, this object mapper is a definite really the one that I would always go to when I'm wanting to use the utility data sets, etc. Okay, so I think I've gone through everything I want to on there. I'm just going to ask Jan if there's anything I should be adding or anything I've missed out on that one. If you want to jump in.
No, thank you for a nice presentation. I think you covered all of it, and I only can agree that Object Mapper is a really efficient way to cover a quick and easy utility works and get a nice map as a result.
Absolutely.
In a good way. Yeah.
Like I said, you can download a trial version if you go to the Guideline Geo website and go to the resources, and in there'll be an option there to download the a trial version. You'll find that you'll get a 2-week trial version. You can use it after the 2-week, but you'll lose the map function. So if you open up the GPS data set, you'll lose a background map, but you can still use it after that with the demo data. The 2-week trial period as well, you can actually open up your own data set if you've collected anything. And I'm just going to look across. I think I've got some questions coming through. So
yeah,
yes,
time
okay.
zero correction.
That's from Steve. Hi, Steve. By the way, I will just switch back to the data set itself on here. You've got a couple of options there. If I just hover over, there's a little red arrow. What I'm going to do, Steve, for this, I'm just going to go back and switch off that delete mean trace so I can see the that first arrival appearing down there. Yeah, so it's slightly high on this one. One of two options here. I can click here and I can drag the 0 line up and down till I get to the top of that first arrival. You just see that just dip down slightly. Or you can go into the tools options and you can manually set the first arrival based on the samples. So you can increase and decrease that manually if you want to do that. But I just tend to do that if that's answering your question, Stephen. What else do we get?
We had a question on different velocities in one radargram from Kate. But I think that you meant that we can have different velocities for different radargrams and not in the same radargram.
Yeah, exactly. I think when you when we insert or with the hyperbola fit in or set the velocity, it will be for the whole of that one profile. I can't change it in the horizontal. And like I say, if you've got a number of profiles on one velocity, then I can deal with that and export the markers out and then move on to the rest. But I can't change it on one profile, unfortunately. Like I said earlier, we've tried to keep this software as simple as possible and quick and effective. So there are some things that you might be able to do in other software that's a little bit limited on this one. Maybe a little bit of a frustration there, I guess, for the more advanced users. But like I say, we're just trying to keep this simple and straightforward.
And then we have some questions on when Object Mapper 2020 will arrive and if we have any plans to combine it with 3D modeling.
I think that's a natural progression, and there will be something coming out sometime in the future, whether it comes out as Object Mapper 2020 or 21, or in a slightly different format and a different way that we're doing it. That would be a natural progression. It's something that I probably like. But when we start moving to 3D, then we start to complicate things. So we need to look at how we do that and how to simplify that. But I think that's a good idea at some point. You mentioned the older Easy 3D software. That was a nice, easy to use. And I think what we're trying to do in the next development is actually apply something similar to, in a way, to Easy 3D. Obviously more modern and more up-to-date way of doing that. So I guess just keep an eye out. And we have got something coming out not too far in the distance in the future. So keep an eye out on that one. We'll shout about that when that's ready.
Do we have a possibility to view A-scans in Object Mapper, Mike?
No, we don't, unfortunately. That could be a nice feature. We can't, unfortunately. There's no option in there. But yeah, I'd probably like that feature to be added, but again, keeping it simple. If you need to see the A scan, I'd probably open it up in a different software. We have Ground Vision, which has the A scan option. So if you need to have a look at that in more detail, that could be an option as well, I think. And what about the use of AI in GPR? That's something that we have been working on over the last year or so, and that will be implemented at some point, both on the GPR itself when we're data collecting, and in things like this as well. So I think that will be on its way at some point in the future. I don't know exactly when. It's difficult to say at this point. Is there anything else, Jana, that I've missed?
I think that we have covered all the questions in the chat.
Perfect. Well, like I said earlier, you're more than welcome to drop us a line at any point. We'll just hang around for a minute or two after we've finished the session. You can still type away if you come up with a question. We'll see that, even though we close the end of the webinar. Hopefully that was giving you a bit of a taster of what the software can do, how easy it is, and the features and functions within that. And please feel free to drop us any more questions at any point. But what I will do now is I will end the webinar. Thank you for attending, and stay safe, everybody. And we will be back online with a different webinar soon.
Yeah, 10th of September, I will talk about the geophysical investigations in geotechnical projects in Sweden.
Excellent. That sounds very interesting. So we'll post those out via the usual routes and websites, etc. So keep an eye out for those. That's great. Okay, everybody. Thank you very much for attending, and we'll see you again soon sometime.
Thank you.